what's going on tonight? What is this vocabulary revolution that is in the headline? Well, Dr. Hiebert is going to share that with us tonight, but I wanted just to put a little background to this. If you think about our mission field, so to speak, of all those students, some come to us with much fewer resources in terms of money. But maybe the next biggest gap that we experience as educators with our students, besides after money, and is access to not just money, but access to words, the quick access to their meanings, lots of them, and how they're connected. And this is something that Freddy has been investigating in depth, and she knows a much faster and more effective way to bridge that gap so that the folks that are highly resourced and the folks that are less resourced may both grow greatly in their vocabulary instruction and vocabulary knowledge, I should say. So that is why it's a super big treat to bringing this topic to you. I bet you are concerned about vocabulary, but you're probably also maybe overwhelmed by the thought of how to pull it off. So why are we bringing here Dr. Freddy Hiebert? She is a prolific reading researcher and literacy leader. And as I said, she's had a huge influence on the development of my thinking here at Reading Simplified. And she was just a wee lass of, I think, 6 maybe, when she helped co-write this Becoming a Nation of Readers, which is probably one of the most influential documents in reading research from the 80s. And she's been going strong ever since. Now she's the president and CEO of Text Project, which has such an amazing wealth of resources. That's my #1 goal after getting her main idea out today, is to have everybody go over to her website, Text Project, because she's taking the dense ideas of research, making it more palatable and understandable for those of us who don't have time to get all of the nuances of research, and then also giving us resources for our classrooms. So that's why I'm really excited to share tonight with you Freddy and her new ideas about how to make vocabulary work. Her book is called Teaching Words and How They Work, Small Changes for Big Vocabulary Results. And that's exactly what we're always looking for here at Reading Simplified. We want to streamline things. She's got the small changes that will make the big change for our students. So without further ado, Freddy, thank you so much for being here. What would you like to fill in the blanks with, or tell folks a little bit about you that I didn't quite say, or what is it that's that you'd like to share as a little bit of an introduction tonight?
Well, I've been in education a long time. So I actually started teaching 50 years ago.
Ooh.
Here in the state of California. I live in California, and I've been a teacher, educator, and a researcher, as you said, for a pretty long time in some great places like Colorado, in Michigan, and now I'm based in California running Text Project.
Mm-hmm. One of the lead messages that Freddy's sharing with us is that we actually have new research ideas, new information coming out that may change what we do in practice. And so I want her to share that new research, these new ideas that could change how we go about working with our students, particularly in the area of vocabulary. What do you say to that, Freddy?
Well, English is a little bit different than other languages like Spanish or French. We have a lot more words because English has different historical roots, right? So it starts out as a German language, and then we add French to it, and then Latin-based words, and then we also have Greek words that provide the technical aspect. And often, if we have about 600,000 words in the English Oxford Dictionary, which of those words should you teach? And ever since the basal readers started in the 1930s, what we've done is really taken 5 to 8 words from different stories. And often those words aren't connected. And we have never really known, are these the most powerful words we could be teaching? What are we expecting from the words we teach? Well, because of computers, we've been able to take large databases. So here at Text Project, I have scanned around 10,000 texts, student texts, and I have an analyzer that lets me look at 15 characteristics of each word in a text. So if you have that slide from me and Uncle Romy, and you might want to put it up. So what we can do is we can find out. So here's a book that's been used in third grade programs. And what you see here is a word cloud of all the unique words in the book. You see the names like Nanette, Aunt Nanette, and Uncle Romy that appear a lot in the book. But out of these words, and there are about 601 unique words in a book of about 1,700 words, which ones are you going to teach? So 11% of the words are rare, which means that in every 100 words, you see about 8 rare words. But just because it's rare doesn't mean you aren't going to know it. Okay. So if you go to the next slide, you actually see what is typically done. So these are 2 different core reading programs. Both had the same text at grade 3. And what you see is a really range of words here. I mean, what I should have really done is just put the words up from one of these selections and asked you to guess what the book was about. Hard to. Well, the thing about words is that they represent concepts. So what we haven't been teaching here in a text like this are some of the underlying ideas about the content of the text. You know, knowledge is all about words, right? And we haven't been helping kids understand how words work. I mean, some of these words, like a word like cardboard or a word like yanked, are going to be pretty easy to figure out. You probably don't need a half-hour or 15-minute lesson on the word yanked or even smeared. So this new work that lets us look at the distributions of words in thousands of texts, and in a nanosecond, I can get the information on all the words in a book like this. And we can now start clustering the words together. Words that fit together in terms of meaning. Are there other words that have to do with models? Or are there other ideas about, you know, is ruined really a critical idea in this book? It's really about a boy coming of age in a new context, away from home. And if you turn to the next slide, what these new ideas do is they say, let's think about what kids could learn from this book. So it turns out this particular author uses an incredible number of compound words in this story. Compound words that have to do with the context and the things this boy James is seeing when he comes to Harlem, when he comes to New York City to visit his aunt and uncle. Okay, that's a really different notion than just picking kind of these words that I've never known how they picked them. Okay, so what I'm saying is that as a result of computers, we know more about words. I can tell you which of these words are actually predicted to have been in kids' oral language by the point they see it in text. I can tell you about which words have rich morphological families. And we can start clustering words according to different ideas of things that happen in books. So if you go to the next, just click the next slide, another part of the book that you might deal with, and often we don't really do a lot with proper nouns. And it turns out proper nouns are really prominent in books. In our last study of the rare words in books, we find about 30% of the rare words are actually proper nouns. So we could actually be teaching kids here about what some of the features of this city, a city that's important, right, in the United States, Penn Station, Harlem, Statue of Liberty, and so on. So I'm just saying we have some choices as a result of this digitization that helps us help kids know about words, but also retain some knowledge. Okay, so one of the big findings in research is that what you know about a topic influences how well you comprehend. So rather than doing all these kind of random words and random topics, what we want to be doing is building bodies of knowledge. We don't know exactly, I'm not suggesting there have to be precise bodies of knowledge, like these are the only bodies of knowledge you can have in third grade. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying we have to teach kids to learn things from text. And the words are what represents that knowledge. So I hope that gave folks an idea why we know new things.
Exactly. A lot of folks are saying, yeah, I've always wondered how they picked words. And a lot of folks are really drawn to this idea of clustering words. So can you tell us more about your work with word families? You talk about that in this new book of yours, Teaching Words and How They Work. But I bet that information about word families and just the numbers of them and that's new information and might help teachers get their head around how this might be a better way than picking 5 to 8 words randomly from a text.
Well, let's go back to those random words. If you can go back to that slide. So the thing about words is that they're in networks. One kind of network are morphological families. We call those word families. So, for example, glorious is part of a word family with glory. And that's an important part, or cardboard, right, is part of a word family with board, like whiteboard or blackboard or whatever. And we maybe have cardboard box, or, well, that would be a phrase. But words are in conceptual groups. They're in morphological groups where there's some part of a meaning unit. And in fact, the work that I've been doing, I took all the Common Core state standards exemplars that the Common Core developers believed were exemplars. We could ask lots of questions about that, but that's not our topic today. But I took all those texts, had them scanned, and I asked, what vocabulary accounts for the majority of the words in those books? And it turns out there are 2,500 word families. And the word families aren't any surprise early on. Yes, the Dolch words are there. And there are words like modeled as part of it. A lot of the words that are in the 2,500 words, word families, are words that have multiple meanings. They serve different functions. Okay, so a word like concerned, concerning, concerned is another example of what you'd see in a morphological family. So I don't think that there's one single way to teach vocabulary, but there is a stance toward teaching. And what I'm saying is it's not a wordless perspective, a word list, not wordless, a word list perspective, but a word network perspective. And the networks can be morphological families. And one of the things that we have to remember as teachers is that English, when we add new ideas, like around the digital revolution, a lot of those ideas are words that get used in a new way, like the word mouse, or they're words that are compound words. Okay, so these 2,500 families, they do a lot of heavy lifting. Like the word model can mean a lot of different things. Or a word like feast can be a noun or a verb. So what I'm saying is we want to teach kids about those systems of morphology, and we don't have time tonight to go into the different systems, but the words that come from the Anglo-Saxon base have a different kind of system. They're the ones that make all the compound words. And then the words from the French Latin system have a different kind of morphology. Those would be like the derivations, prefixes and suffixes. And the Greek words are, again, a lot of them are compounded, right? Like chemo, therapy, psychotherapy, we can, hydrotherapy, I guess. I don't know.
That's the thing.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is we want to teach morphological networks, but we always, from the get-go, want to be teaching kids about semantic networks. So when push comes to shove, what is it that I learned that's connected from this text? And remember that vocabulary that's unique to a text is going to help you understand what the text is about. And I was just showing you with me and Uncle Romy a couple different ways you could do it. Okay, you could do it by a certain structure, like compound words, or you could do it content of places. What makes unique context, like a city, skyscrapers, there's the underground, so on. So, the point here really is you want to give kids not just the single word and make sure that you've covered a list of, like I've gotten through all the 2,500 word families. That's not the point. The point is, what are the connected bodies of knowledge that these words represent? What is it that I'm learning? What does the vocabulary represent? So instead of just these random individual words, I'm understanding that, there are certain dimensions of a city that are important, or there's certain dimensions of a historical event that I want to learn about in a story, or there's something I want to learn about the vocabulary that has to do with the ways in which people interact with each other. For example, ways in which people communicate is a really important part of stories. So if a writer tells you that they're planning something rather than scheming, that's a really different thing. And narratives, we have just a lot of adjectives, verbs that are connected. A good writer of a narrative doesn't do what the Dick and Jane writers did, which is keep repeating the same word over and over again. You don't just go run, run, run and say run over and over again. You say, maybe they were galloping, or they were chasing, or, lots of different words that you can have. That we have a really rich vocabulary in English, and we want to teach kids how these words are connected.
I'm getting a lot of folks saying that they're totally buying into this concept of a network and the connections, and it makes much more sense than picking some words that kids might not know, but they're not connected to one another, and as you point out, maybe not even connected to the core, the meat of the story. So you're turning that on its head, and then they're at the same time, we're getting some anxiety. Okay, so how do I teach the 2,500 words? But that's why I'm so excited about her book, and I want you to check it out. She's got this brilliant idea in here about small changes, and she talks about Freddie's talking about 4 C's as a kind of a rubric or a mental framework for us to think about our change in practice that could be small, micro changes that would lead to big results. So Freddie, do you think you could give us some examples? And I can pull up some images from Text Project where she has a wealth of resources, so you don't have to make these networks on your own. Although once you get into it, I think you'll find that it's kind of fun. So maybe like what would be a small change for maybe a kindergarten teacher, and maybe a small change for someone maybe at the 4th or 5th grade level?
Well, one of the small changes is ensuring that kids do an extensive amount of reading. So 2,500 families and their family members, each of these families has about 5 or 6 members on average. I mean, the family of the doesn't have any other members, but, Concern or Glory would have a bunch of members. And it's not about saying, am I getting all these words exactly right? What you're doing is you're ensuring, especially what I'd say to teachers working with kindergarten kids, is make sure that what you're exposing kids to has some knowledge connections. Okay, so if I do some books on seeds and plants, I'm going to keep seeing some words about seeds and plants, maybe cone or dirt. Okay, so what you want to do is ensure that there's some repetition of ideas and that you've actually stored those ideas somewhere. So I talk a lot in the book about it might be a new form of word wall, but I call them word collections. And I want to emphasize that these aren't just random words I'm putting up there, but I'm helping kids, and there aren't right words to sort necessarily. You know, I mean, there are lots of different ways in which I might say these words are related to each other. But what I want to do is ensure that kids are cognizant of what they've been learning. Okay, so these word collections, we want to keep adding to them. So for example, if I had seed and plant, you know, I might also do some stuff around morphology, like seedling and plants and planting. Okay, and I want to keep that map so that we can review it periodically to see all that we know on this topic. So a critical part, I think, as kids are getting older, so you were asking about the fifth graders, are the conversations we have with kids.
Another one of your C's.
It is one of the C's. And I think we've often been very secretive about how language works. And I don't mean teaching rules, but we haven't talked about the fact that, you know, a lot of words in English have a lot of different meanings. Okay. And by the way, this is just a little hack for, and the Australians might not understand this, or the Canadians, but we're coming into testing season in the United States. And some people spend a lot of time thinking about how they can support their kids. And one of the things I'm going to recommend is let your kids know that, you know, about 90 to 95% of the words they see in text keep happening over and over again. Okay, that's the 2,500 families. That's what we saw in the Common Core analysis. Okay, so when you get to a task on a new text, whether you're reading it independently or whether you're doing it as part of an assessment, be ready. And fifth graders and third graders and fourth graders, they need to know this. Be ready for about 3 to 4 words you probably haven't seen before in a passage. And it's likely that these words are going to be connected to each other. But because we do a lot of reading in our class, that means you've had a lot of experience becoming flexible with the meanings of all these words that keep appearing. And you'll be able to, with the great decoding that your teacher learned from reading Simplified, to be able to figure out the new words in the context of text. So just because it's a new word doesn't mean you can't figure it out. Okay? A lot of, you know, words that kids know, you know, think of a word like gerbil or even monkey. You know, those words don't appear a lot in text, so they're not highly frequent, but when you see it, you can figure it out. Okay, so I would have very definite conversations with kids about be prepared, you know, be ready, stay calm and carry on, and know that, you know, you're going to see that you're going to keep doing it. I can never teach you all the words you need to know. What I'm doing is making sure you know the major part of the lexicon, the major part of the words in text, and then we're going to have ways I'm supporting you to figure out the new words. Okay, but when you're on your own, okay, they're going to likely be clustered to the topic. You can use the context, so on.
So these are part of the conversations that you're going to have, even with our kindergartners. Those littles can handle that at some level, right? And your examples will become more and more sophisticated. And if you start that conversation at the beginning of the year and you weave it through all the read alouds and all the science lessons and all the social studies lessons, it will become part of their strategic approach to learning words, right?
Right. So when I see a new text, oh, I have to remember, yeah, I know most of the words, but there are always going to be some new ones. That's why I read. I read to learn new things. Okay. And I also want to periodically be reviewing in my little notebook or the class collection. I want to be reviewing what I've been learning. So I know about these topics.
Yep.
And and because English has so many words, that's because there's so many ideas here. We're going to keep adding to these networks. Okay, so we're not done. You know, I think some kids, they approach these tasks thinking there's something wrong that they don't, and that they're going to have so many words that they don't know.
Right.
But that isn't the case. I mean, if you go back to that, the diagram where I showed the rare words in this text. If you go to the next one, yeah. I mean, if you look at some of those, like postcards, peanuts, Subway, those are rare words.
Wow.
Stickball. And do you notice this author just uses an incredible number of compound words, which is, you know, we want to start looking at the kind of styles of writers, right? So it's not that you can't figure these out or that the words aren't in your vocabulary. But what you need to do is you need to be flexible and ready for that. And I think for older kids, they really need to be clear. I mean, I don't think you and I picked a slide, Martin, for to share with people to show, but at Text Project, I have some examples where I show in yellow print all the words that kids that come from that are common and the presence of unique words, especially on assessments. So, you know, I'm really encouraging people. There has to be some reading. I think reading needs to be, the more you do around topics and not just random books on different things. You know, a lot of level books, you jump from reading about, you know, skateboards to the history of France to something else, you know? And what we want to do is, to the degree possible, when people ask, oh, I'm getting nervous about this, do as much clustering as you can of the books that you have, because it turns out level books have an incredible amount of variation, even within a level. So you can go across levels and feel okay about it. But it's the topic that's probably more important. Yes, we've taken a lot of the words in the 2500 that are concrete, and we put them into these 16 sets of word pictures that you're free to use. Remember, everything at Text Project is
free.
It's you know, a way in which we can use our resources to help you. And this is an example of some of the words on transportation. And yes, we always show, you know, the syllable, because I think the kids encountering words with different syllables can be hard. So yeah, this is just an example here of.
And this is, you guys, this is 78 pages. So this is in depth on transportation. Think about all the books that you have read on the subject of transport, or that you know, has transportation as an important part of it, that you could connect back to this. And this could be connected back to across the entire year, this one theme. And she's got so many others. Water.
Can you go back to the beginning of that, though? Yeah, there's water, machines, places, plants. But if you go back to the next slide, what's critical here is that for each of these bubbles, there's a semantic map. So if you go to the next one, you can actually see that. So what I think it might be, you might need to go, yes, right there. Okay, and this is an example of what I'm calling a word collection. And do you also see that you could do things with rhyming words here? You know, so you could do a whole bunch of rhyming words. You can do plurals. If some words are also, you know, function as a noun and a verb, you could do inflected endings. I'm suggesting that this idea of helping kids recognize what they know and how things fit together is what vocabulary is about. It's not just this, oh, that sounds like a really interesting word, you know?
Mhm.
And I think, Marnie, you also had up the super synonym clusters. Yeah. So one of the other things I've done, and this is what digitization allows, computers allow, what I've done is I've gone in and gotten the most prolific groups of words, and here they are, 20 really prolific words in stories. So the ways in which people communicate, the ways in which people move, and their traits and emotions, those are central parts of stories. And it turns out that the basic ideas kids usually know. I think you can go a pretty long way with mad, bad, glad, sad, you know? And these are words that they'll know, and then they become the source for expanding the semantic network. I've given this to you as teachers. You know, there are also blank forms. Please don't think that you're throwing all of this at kids all at once. But you want kids to also become investigative and look for some of these. But from my perspective, you know, understanding that a good writer just doesn't keep using the word sad over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of good narrative is the quality of adjectives and verbs and adverbs and nouns, you know, how people embellish the language.
So this is part, we've been talking a little bit about her 4 C's, some small changes that we could make. And I think mostly we talked about conversations that we're going to have with our students, as well as collections and word collections. And this would be an example of a word collection that you can start with, but then the kids could expand on it, as Freddie mentioned. You know, it could be posted on the board, or they could have their own copy and they could find words in their own reading if they have choice reading, which is another of Freddie's C's. Think how fun if it would be if they think of themselves as detectives on a hunt to find words that fit into this network that they're learning about and talking about with the class, maybe tied to some texts, picture books, novels, or maybe just tied to a concept. And it folds through all of our content areas. This is not just ELA. And then I just also wanted to mention, besides conversations and collections of words and choice reading, Freddie's also talking about core reading. These are being simple ways to change the way we're thinking about vocabulary. It's not going to be just 6 words that we introduce on Monday and test them on Friday that are somewhat random. Or just plucked from a book because they're hard, but they're going to be more meaningful. They're going to be connected, and we're going to be discussing them, and they're going to be things that the teacher's leading with, and then also sounds like we're going to let our kids lead with it. So everyone's excited about text projects. I wanted to not leave without giving you a chance, Freddie, to kind of give teachers one direction. You've talked about a lot of things that may be blowing their mind, and it is kind of revolutionary, which is why we titled it this way. What would be one thing you'd want teachers to walk away with, to do maybe tomorrow, or to think about as they leave this time together?
I'd like for you to think about words as belonging to knowledge bases, that there's what we're about in text is about knowledge, and the way in which we express knowledge is through words. So what we want kids, the reason we want to expand our vocabularies is because we want to learn more things, but they need to be connected. So if you could walk away with one thing, I think some of those networks in the word pictures would be what I'd really recommend. You know, starting with some concrete things that kids know about. They can add things, you know, animals for younger kids is just an incredible resource. And one of the word pictures is about animals. There are places, there are roles of people are really important in stories. So I'd really recommend to people that, you know, I think when people hear about morphology, they start thinking, oh, I have to teach in these groups of words, you know, with a similar meaning. I'm suggesting that the more I learn, the more I'm convinced that we need to really recognize and help kids recognize what they know.
Mm.
Okay, so I think some of these semantic maps can really do that.
Mm-hmm.
To help you recognize what it is that I know and I've learned. And I'd also throw in that expectation. Keep remembering, you're a good reader,
Mm.
and you're always going to keep finding new words because we just have so many. And I don't think we've actually shared that with kids.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that you're kind of hinting at here with these type of super synonyms. They know the word sad. Let's learn some other cool words for sad. And here, particularly for any of our English language learners who know Spanish, you've even gotten the Spanish connection of the words that are connected to sad. And they might know unhappy and sorry and terrible. They know some of these. Yay, let's see how we can expand on that. And let's see how sorrow is really big sad. And yeah, so that's neat. We're there is this persistent question. If we can just take one more thing, Freddie, and see if you can give like an idea for a lesson. She's already talked about conversations and collections. So what might a little, like, say, I think a lot of times you're talking about in your book using picture books or novels. What would be a lesson, like an intro to a book or something that you do right in the middle of a book that would be something that people could walk away with as an example of these networks?
I think the example that I gave with me and Uncle Romy,
we'll pull that up,
is one, is a good one. So this is an author who is describing, this is really interesting actually, because they're describing an artist who does a lot of collage. So if you go a couple slides further. So it's an artist who puts things together. And it turns out that this writer is using a lot of words, right, that are kind of connected together. You know, so that I think really actually ties in so beautifully with this story. So I want to suggest to folks, there aren't right answers here. It's getting kids to think about it. And the thing that I want to do is leave them with many more. I don't have to teach each of these words directly. You know, I don't have to do a whole song and dance about, you know, how is an underground different than a doorway or whatever. You know, we've had these little metrics that we follow through in lessons. What I want to do is start seeing, look at all the ideas in this book. That's pretty amazing.
So it's not only is it going to build the networks and build our students' knowledge of what they already know and kind of make their confidence, it's also kind of more honoring the intent of the author, isn't it? Yeah, I love it.
And by the way, the chapter, I picked my favorite chapter. Well, there are a lot, I guess all of them are, but
how are your children are favorites?
The chapter is called Remixing and Recycling Words. So the point is that we do, you know, compounding is remixing and recycling is when we use mouse in a new way. And we do a lot of that. Language is really great. By the way, at Text Project, I also have these, a series called The Stories of Words. So it's about how words came to be. You know, like what words came into English from the indigenous people in North America, for example.
Well, Freddie, thank you so much. This has been really exciting. I want these ideas to get into lots of classrooms so that we empower our teachers and our students. So thank you so much for doing this work and sharing your ideas.
Marnie, thanks for what you do. And Marnie and I have just had some great conversations to get ready for this. I feel like I have a new best friend. And thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. It's been great. Thank you.
Would you like future complimentary trainings like this here at Reading Simplified? Then make sure you ring the bell here at YouTube to become a subscriber so that you learn more of our ways of streamlining instruction and accelerating students' reading achievement. And you can also find us on Facebook at Reading Simplified, usually on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go live with other complimentary trainings, and we give away some freebies for teachers and parents. So I hope to see you here again next time on YouTube or even on Facebook. Take care.